conversation. Guys, thanks both for joining us, Pete and Shiny. What I was going to do, as I was explaining earlier, we'll have a chat for 20 minutes or so, and then as questions start coming in, and I've already got a few landed in advance from people watching, then I'll start to ask their questions and we can kick it around. But I guess, unfortunate as it is, there's no better starting place than saying, what's your backstory? How did the sort of the onset of the corona rumblings and rumours, and then as the reality started to bite, how did that affect you and the team at Notts?
Well, if I go first, Shane will have his view on it. We didn't quite know what was coming, but we'd already started changing how we trained a little bit, because in the sort of week preceding, so we started a bit of social distancing, 2 entrances into, we had a tent up where we were netting at the time outside. So we started to adjust a little bit. The last thing we did of real significance, we went away for 2 days on a team builder. Of which was a real indicator for me as a coach, because when you take sides away, anybody's taking sides away and you're the sort of head coach, they can be great fun, but it can always be quite stressful because you want it to go well, and it depends how the players and everybody goes about it. We were doing pretty straightforward stuff, which you do for team building, climbing ropes, raft building, that sort of stuff. But the way the lads went about it, it was great fun. We just laughed all day. I never felt I was in charge, never felt I had to run anything. Everybody just took responsibility and did it. And we was in Rutland Water at one point. It was 0 degrees. Didn't matter who you were with. And I came away from that probably as excited as I've been for a long time with that group of people, because a lot of anything, I think, is about the connection and the trust and the fun you can have with doing it and the energy. And I went away thinking, wow, I think we're in a great place to start a season. And then within a week's time, that's the last real contact we've had as a group physically. We've seen each other on Zoom and stuff like that. But that was a pretty stark contrast. Actually, walking away at that point was a culmination of a lot of work had gone with the winter from the lads and everybody, but it felt like we're in a good place. So that's, of course, it's disappointing, and a lot of sides will feel that. But it's also, for me, it's a bit of comfort. Actually, we have moved somewhere, and once you've moved somewhere, that doesn't go away with a break.
We'll come back on to how you managed to deal with the adjustment because of the time, but for you, Shiny, obviously that was your sort of induction to the group as well, so it's probably even more extreme, the impact of what's happened.
It was. So I had my first winter outside of the ECB for 14 years, and it was really exciting. And then, as Pete said, we went on to the team builder, which was brilliant to watch how the guys took charge of everything they were doing. We were literally just passengers. It was great fun. There was lots of, obviously the camaraderie that you want, but you're actually seeing guys grow, which was fantastic. But bubbling away was this pandemic starting to happen, but we all thought we were sort of immune to it. And then it actually hit me a little bit harder than the rest of the boys, because my wife, who works in a school, got poorly, and I was actually isolated with her. And not allowed to go in, which I was trying desperately to persuade Pipey and Pete that I should be in there, and it was only a cold.
It's fine.
Probably was. But no, they told me to stay away, and it was really strange because I had to take the balls in, and I had to stay well away from the tent and drop the balls down and then get out as quickly as I could. So you sort of thought, oh, this is quite serious now, but it was such a shame, based on where the lads had got to after a brilliant winter.
So on that point of adaptation, which of course everybody in the world, not just the nations, had to do, I guess addressing you, Pete, in the first instance, it goes without saying it's a unique situation, but from a coaching perspective, it's like you say, you didn't have to be the coach, you didn't have to be the boss. You've got this group dynamic that's phenomenal, everybody's up for it, they're stepping in, and then everything gets chucked out the window. How did you go about navigating yourself and the group through those early weeks?
I think it goes through phases. I think when it first happened, you don't know how long it was going to go, but you could tell pretty quickly it was going to be significant. There was a real enthusiasm by everybody to do everything. So for me, I stepped back a little bit, if I'm honest, because at that point, I think the nation wanted to do a quiz. It wanted to, as sports teams, you wanted to train together online, take it in turns to do stuff, and it was all going, and it worked great. It got everybody in, and it was new. It suggested that it was a great time to to keep ourselves together, because within a few weeks we're going to come back and we're going to go and play. I think where my role has started to change a bit is as things have moved forward, there becomes these different phases where you start to realise, actually, we're not going to play for a long time. And then there's no guarantees we're going to play this season. And how does that do? And then you start to look, I think, longer term at each person and as a squad. And we've had different things with our squad. We've got sort of older players with kids who've got all the challenges of homeschooling, being busy, and generally the things that come with being further down the line, to youngsters who are, staying in a flat in West Bridgford, where boredom is as much of a challenge. And, young fellas are used to going out, be it to a coffee shop, to play cricket, play golf, do things that you couldn't do any of it. So I think the key for me, and what I said to all the players was, and I still feel it pretty strongly, we've always, through sport and coaching, you're trying to help people become independent and strong and self-motivated. So as a coach, you never do yourself out of a job, but it's working when they're driving everything. This is a great chance for any sportsman to be given that opportunity to go out and be self-reliant and to lead themselves and others around them, within their family units, within people. They can start to grow as people because the chance is there. You've got for a sportsman now, no coaches, no physios on your doorstep or whatever. So I would ask anybody to embrace that challenge, that opportunity, because they'll feel great about it, and they'll be better sportsmen or women when they come back. They'll be better players for it, because ultimately, we talk about, we go and do this. There's no royal we in any sport, any team sport, at any stage. There's a togetherness, but somebody has to deliver at some point. A bowler, a batter, a fielder to take a catch. It might be a basketball game. We've all watched the sort of Michael Jordan, but somebody's got to front up at different times to deliver their bit of skill. And to do that, they've got to be independent and strong, and they've got ways of handling different things that come along with sport. So that's the way I'd see it. I think moving forward again, I'm looking at plenty of different ideas we might do with the players at different levels to try and keep them excited, I think. And there's two ways I look at it. One, the opportunity to take a sabbatical away from the sport and use it as an opportunity to grow in some other area, if that's what you want to do. And also, there's other players who want to use it maybe as an opportunity to grow a different bit of themselves, mentally. Youngsters have started doing different stuff they'd never do, going on walks in the country, going on Headspace, talk about meditation, different things that they would never normally have got into. And from that, for me, I'm hoping there'll be a real, as much as a negative mental impact there could be also a positive one, where people have found different ways of doing things that would give them some solace at times, which goes with pro sport. Pro sport it can be a lonely place, and it can be a really tough place. And if you found different ways of getting around that through this sort of time, I'm hoping those things will stand them all in good stead moving forward.
And I guess that sort of line about coaching the person first and the player second never was a truer time, even if it means coaching yourself. I mean, Shani, obviously you're on furlough at the minute. So how does that resonate with you as somebody who came up, fully revved up into the coaching role, and then all of a sudden, you've got your own challenges because you're isolated in every sense?
My attitude to life is always to find out. It sounds a little bit sort of cheesy, but I'll find a way to still be useful, and whether that's having some great time with my wife and two sons who are a bit older now, but we've got brilliant time together. Keeping myself in as good physical nick as I can be in. Look at some areas where I'm a little bit weaker with regards to my original role was a very sort of lonely role as a national lead. It was a great role to learn and educate myself. But this is a completely different role I've got now. So, around team culture and team dynamics, I'm trying to really, upskill myself there as much as I can, with reading, with watching, with listening to lots of podcasts. So, it's a time, life is fast, isn't it? And it has been really fast. I can't believe where the last few years have gone. So even though this is unpleasant and it's an unpleasant time, let's be clear about that. Around it, there's some real positives that can come out of it. And I'm hoping to come out a better person, more well-educated, and be able to contribute more to Notts when I come out of this. So I've not tried to just sit back and do nothing.
It's interesting that you both picked up on that idea of enable yourself to become a better person, if you like, broaden your horizons, do things, and the way that can impact upon you as a player. Is that something that you were conscious of before? Or is that something that's come to the fore with regards to the current situation? Pete, I don't know what your views on that.
For me, it's
a coach as well, doesn't it?
It's always been there. You can't coach. The first premise of coaching is coaching against. It's too broad to say teaching, but often things that are curriculum based. Coaching is a relationship, and it's about you and somebody else, or you and a team, and how that relationship fits. So it is number one on the list because it is the fundamental to build trust. And without trust, no one's getting anywhere, either as a team or as an individual. So for me, I learned that. All coaches learn that. I think they get told it when they first start, and then through normally bitter experience and cocking it up enough times, they really learn it. That actually, without it, you're screwed. And to do that, you have to then try and see things from other people's point of view, get behind their eyes at times, but you've also got to be true to yourself and how you are. So you don't trust anybody who you think's not being authentic and straight. So you've got to learn your own way and what it's about. So when people say, get to know yourself, self-development, get feedback and all that sort of stuff, the importance of that is until you know yourself, you might not be being consistent and true to yourself. So top flight sportsmen and women they're savvy, they are top end of their field, and they are sharp, and they pick up on it in a heartbeat. And so they can feel what you're feeling. They can sense your energy and what you're bringing in. So it's really important. So coaching the person in front of you is number one. And in many ways, that means coaching yourself. So you're ready to go into that room and be there, be the person you want to be. Because, when people say the coaching session didn't go so well, 9 times out of 10 for me, if I know, it's because I went in with the wrong either preparation or energy or buzz about me. It's easy to offload it onto the players, but generally, if I'm buzzing, players buzz more often than not. And I think realistically, you look inside first to decide where you're at. So it's a people business sport, as is life.
And we'll move away from the current crisis in a minute, but just while we're on that, now you're literally having to do things by remote. What have you learned? What have you had to adapt because of that? Because you mentioned yourself in the run up to doing this chat, coaching is quite a tactile pastime, literally hands-on at times, but there's a lot of to and fro and the dynamics when you're with a group, and suddenly you're placed into a very different framework. How much have you had to change your style with people to be able to do it through things like Zoom or whatever?
I think one of the big things I've learned in coaching is that there's 2 ways of coaching. One, when you go to the player, and 2, when the player comes to you. When the player comes to you, whatever happens, it's always a stronger connection or a stronger conversation than when you're going the other way. Often with the Zoom, I haven't gone down this route because I think if you're trying to push things onto people and promote things, I think that's very difficult because they've got to be ready. I think what I've found is certainly you continually go and speak to the person, how they're going, where they're at, and then through those conversations, a bit like coaching normally, like people come up to you and go, yeah, read any good books interesting at the moment, anything happened, or I'm interested in this. And that then sparks off something where you go to. The other part of coaching, which it's harder on Zoom, but in life coaching for me, one of my things is try and create opportunities for other people. Because that is the opportunity, is the chance. And that to me is, I once got Jack Bond, great man, captain Lancashire, umpired, ended up working on the grounds there. I had lots of conversations with him. He's no longer with us, but loved him. And he said basically to me once, he said, Pete, I hope you always realise what we are as a coach, we're chance makers. We make decisions on creating opportunities for people. And if you do that, and you take the responsibility of doing that, then I think you're being fair to the people you coach, because you can't give it to everybody. And that, to me, selecting teams is always, but I always see it like, 11 people get a chance, get an opportunity to change their lives maybe in a given day. Those opportunities now on the field are not there, which it means there's quite a big change in focus for players. A short term of we prepare for a season now has to turn into a much longer thing of I've got to develop myself as a player and a person without being able to hit a ball sometimes, which is a different thing.
Yeah, which I guess will potentially give you could probably make the call depending on how well you know the guys, but it will give you a fresh insight into some people, and some people probably a fresh insight into themselves.
Yeah, I mean, some people have really stepped up as well, just naturally, a bit of leadership in them, phoning round other people, checking other people, that sort of style comes out. And I don't think there's a right or a wrong in that. If that comes out in you, fantastic. And I think, that, like always with times of crisis or change, you see different things in different people. And I think I talk a lot to coaches and say one of the things, if you can do it, I think is a great skill, is changing the lens you look at things through. Because as a coach, we're sort of brought up to look through a technical lens all the time. And I think if you can change that to look through sometimes, are they enjoying it lens? Are they okay lens? Are they happy? I think now the lens, I would say to any coach, the first lens you're looking through is, are they okay? That's the lens you're going to look through. Anything else will come after that. And I think generally the more you coach, that becomes one of the first lenses you look through.
Yeah.
Where they are, because 11 players, 25 players on a staff, if they are happy, energetic, committed to what they're going to do, you're on a winner before you start.
Shiny, obviously, I've not addressed any of those to you because you're on furlough, as we said earlier. So you're at home doing your thing and no doubt expanding your brain rapidly as you do it. We've had quite a few questions though from there's suddenly, and it's mums and dads, but parents are suddenly, some of whom were doing it before, but many are assuming the role now of coach because their kids can't play the game either. So this is not the easiest question in the world to just crop on you, but generally speaking, what would your advice be, picking up on what Pete was saying about, looking out for things and looking through lenses? What's your advice to the parents around the world who've suddenly got the mantle of having to not just be the mum, the dad, but also the coach to help their child pursue their sporting ambition?
Shall I start with this one? So I might have a little bit of insight here. So my eldest is at Swansea Uni. He's a rugby player. He's in their elite squad. I don't know mass. I watch rugby and I really enjoy it, but I've never coached it. So what I've learned to do, I've used all my skills that I possibly can, is listen to what he wants to do, and then just get involved in different ways of helping him to get where he wants to go. And it's a bit of a shameless plug this. I'm a big fan of Dave Allred and I've worked with him in the past. His mantra being, how have you improved in that session, in that day? That's all I've tried to do with Jack, with my limited knowledge of rugby coaching. And I'm finding that it's just expanding my just my knowledge of how to work with younger players, which whether it's a younger player, younger person, it's got to be about that listening. Let them talk, find out where they want to go, and then you'll find you'll have an enormous amount of fun, and that's the coach as well. Have an enormous amount of fun as you go on that journey with them.
Brilliant. Pete, is that something that resonates with you?
Yeah, so Shiner, like me, has got children he's gone through. I've got Tom, who now is a pro player, who's gone through that sort of journey. Yeah, I mean, what Kevin said, I think, is it's one of the key skills of coaching is to be able to listen. I mean, there's also a couple of, I suppose, red flags I would say to any parent, just to be aware that it's got to be it's their dream, their drive, their goals, and you've got to make sure you respect that. And if at times I watched Tom going through, his enthusiasm for cricket it was always there, but he also was interested in lots of other things, be it rugby, football, all sorts of stuff, PlayStations, Xboxes, God, you name it. But then somewhere at a certain point, his drive to go further became really evident. And then he wanted, again, I go back, he wanted Dad to create more opportunity for him. And I don't mean that by pushing him into a side. I mean by, if it's driving into a net, standing there and just being enthusiastic, listening to his conversations about what he's trying to do and whatever, and just being there. Because that's what I think girls, boys, they, you know, what you can't get away from, to become a great sportsman or woman, you've got to do a lot of it.
Yeah.
You know, you can talk about it all you like, but you've got to go do a lot. And it doesn't all have to be structured. It can be playing with a football against the wall, or for us, knocking a cricket ball against the wall. But with that, if the parent has an enthusiasm about them doing it, enjoy it, maybe makes up a couple of games for them when they're doing it, or it's a bit of fun, that just helps to it. And also doesn't put undue pressure on them now in the systems we run to, which is you should be somewhere by a certain point, which is one of the big challenges I think that come with academies. You know, we don't expect people to make mistakes when they're 16, 17 anymore. Well, that's when you should be making them all. Yeah. We want them to be perfect at that point. And that to me is embrace the mistakes, embrace providing they want to keep having another go. That's totally normal. It's where they'll become more than, take away the mistakes, you'll get a technically perfect sportsman or woman. At 16, 17, 18, they'll probably be slightly ahead of the game, maybe with their peers. But when it gets to 19, 20, 21, 22, they'll suddenly stop falling behind because they've started to play safe, they're not making mistakes, and they're not growing at the rate that other people are coming through later. So stretching, enjoying the challenge of stuff as you do as a 10, 11, 12-year-old, if you can extend that into your teens and late teens, then I think you're onto something big and you can move fast as a player.
Yeah, and that both those answers resonate with me. We've done some work with a Premier League football club over the last couple of years, including with our academy, and listening to interviewing some of the young lads and some of the stuff they say that they're picking up on parents, and I'm sure most of them, all the parents are probably incredibly well-meaning, but the amount to which the kids are tuned in to the downcast look or the bit of frustration is frightening. So yeah, it's like you say, those are red flags, aren't they? To make sure that
they're red flags to be aware of. I mean, and we could all show disappointment, but when it's mixed with the care factor and the other things that go with it, and actually the perspective of, come on, mate, the beauty of this, you get another crack next week or tomorrow or whatever, you learn something from it. That perspective, I think, what you don't want is the judgment game or the blame game being played. Once it starts to become judgmental and blaming, then I think, Dad, I've given up all my day for this to watch this and you played rubbish, sort of type approach. Then it comes really challenging for the athlete then, because they get another layer of pressure from, there's enough pressure in sport, even in youth sport now, there's enough pressure for expectation for them want to do well. Yeah. And doing well doesn't mean you have to win every day.
Absolutely. I'm going to start going to there's quite a few questions coming through, so it's all right with you guys. I'm going to start pulling them off more or less at random. And I say more or less because I'm not quite sure it's coincidence or not, but Chris, thank you for asking, Chris, wants to know, have you, either or both of you, been watching The Last Dance on Netflix? And if so, how have you connected to this within your world of coaching? Number one of either, I think you've watched it, Pete, because you referenced it, didn't you?
I've watched it. Shani, you go first if you want, mate. Have you watched it?
It's on my list. I'm starting it this week. Tommy, my youngest son, is watching it now, and I get a little bit of a summary of it when he comes down in the morning for breakfast. And I asked one question about Michael Jordan, and he basically said he knows what he wants to do and how he wants to get there. So I'm looking forward to it. I've heard a lot about it. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we'll come at the end of the call. Everybody stay tuned. We'll come to your box set recommendations, but we can come on to that later. So Pete, yeah. So I mean, I've seen some of it. There's everyone's talking about it. It seems in sporting fields. How has it, picking up on Chris's question? How have you connected with it? And I guess
I've not watched it all the way through. I'm about 6 or 7 episodes in. I think it's fantastic for a coach. Anyway, it's fantastic because it's interesting because it's 27 years ago. You know, when it happened. And I look at the way those basketballers are behaving, and actually they're very similar to our lads now, actually, in England, which is it shows how cultures and things move across. But there's so much to take. I think so many questions for a coach can ask himself, what do you take from it? This desire of Jordan to win, without a shadow of a doubt. But the evolution of that team was born through, often, why does it take a long time sometimes or several years to develop a team to where you want to be, depending where those people are? It's sort of, you watch it play out live. You sort of watch them get beaten up without giving too much away, getting beaten up by the Detroit Pistons, and then really they need more physicality. So they go and train hard, and it's led by Jordan to give an off-season away to go and train. And there's lots and lots of things like that within it, I think, that you can start to pick out that makes it comes across like it's real sport. You can see the mistakes, the frustration of Jordan, having been the lead, the most valuable, the MVP in the NBA for probably 4 or 5 years, but still hadn't won the trophy, and he still felt incomplete. So for a sportsman to realise, if you're speaking to one of your sportsmen, to say, well, completion often as a sportsman, if you're in a team sport, is when we win, not just you win. And that's one of the greatest sportsmen who's ever lived. And it's extraordinary, his athleticism, his frankness, I think, and the way he puts things across, even now when you're listening to him speak, and what sport leaves you with. It leaves you with memories and pains and joys that live with you forever. And that's what I love about sport. Somebody shows me a replay of the 2020 semi-final last year, it'll still knock my stomach. It's part of what sport does. Like the same token, when we win it in 17, I'll be beaming all over my face. But I've loved watching it. I'm sort of trying not to use it up too quick, because it's a really nice thing to look forward to go and watch an episode, if you know what I mean. But I know a lot of our players have watched it and taken a lot from it. So I'm looking forward to discussing it with them actually over the next bit at times, what they take from it, because they are lessons for sportsmen, or what you really look at, lessons for us as coaches, but things that are transferable for a sportsman to see actually, because one thing is absolutely for sure, however talented he was or that team were, they didn't get there without hard work.
Yeah. And I think as well, the bit I've observed is, talk about a disparate range of characters. You were sort of talking about the technically perfect. You've got Dennis Rodman in the mix.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know who your Dennis Rodman is, but maybe that's for another conversation. But, this was not a group of conformists by any stretch of the imagination, was it? And yet, which I guess comes to it's a big old question when it coaching, but it's probably the ultimate one for team sports, is how do you create a team? How do you create a culture that functions in the way that you want it to do? How do you go about doing that? There must be a lot of coaches watching this and be watching this later going, how do I get this bunch of guys or girls sort of singing?
For me, that one of the first things, you can speak about culture and environments you create, and we'll see the words written down, build trust, the energy and stuff. I think you need to get your own words in your own head as a coach of what that looks like, which I think is really important. And then when I first go anywhere, often you watch, you learn, you listen from what is actually going on at the moment, because with any culture, you're trying to build on what's there rather than reinvent something completely new. So if you ask me, when I went into a club, normally I would speak to a lot of people, players and people around, and you get a feel for where things are at. And often then you start finding yourself saying to people what you'd like and what you think is important. So for me, in any sort of setup, it needs to have trust to start with. And often trust, I say to people, it's a bit like safety challenge. So a great family unit for me is, it's safe enough to make a mistake. And as soon as you know it's safe enough to make a mistake, you will challenge yourself to go and do something. So often it's mum or dad either way on different subjects. Sometimes mum's saying, you need to do more of this. And dad's going, leave him alone. Let's go and kick a football around. And there's a bit of both. And sometimes it's dad pushing and mum. But the balance between that, to me, is fundamental if you want growth. Because no one gets better without stretching themselves. No one gets better without making mistakes as they stretch themselves. So the safety challenge trust thing for me sits at the bottom. That's fun. Once that's in, then you can really start to go, because then it becomes an excitement and you can nearly judge the energy. Without energy, you can't move. I say to people, 3 sorts of people: give it, take it, or sit on the fence. And I really don't like people who take it or sit on the fence, because I can't win with them. I can't move with them. And energy doesn't mean you have to be loud or whatever. You just think in a way of what could be. What could be rather than what is. Where can we take it? What can we do? Where can we go to? And that becomes a way of being. And I think you have those conversations with people, and then organically often things start to evolve where people, they nearly call you in the meeting to say, we need to talk about this, and get get this down on paper where we're at, so we can communicate to everybody, and then it starts to evolve. I think there's a danger of going in with a set of rules of trying to bang it in straight away without really getting to know the people, because then there's a danger that you'll get kicked back and fight, and once it starts to get into that thing, then you'll get there eventually. It just takes more time.
China, you've been in and out of obviously ECB for many years, but that role took you in and out of many different environments. I don't know what your reflections are on what Pete said, or anything to add from what you've witnessed, the way other people have done it well, or not so well, perhaps.
So I referenced this a little bit earlier. You know, one of the areas that I feel that I need to, you know, really educate myself on is this idea of long-term culture, because my job was, generally we had a group of cricketers in for a very short period of time, you know, on a Lions tour or a performance program. They just wanted to get better, and we wanted to work out would they be good enough to move on. So we didn't really look long term. And you know, coming into Notts now and seeing you know, the long term nature of this culture, and you know, how the players are being involved has been really interesting to see. You have some unbelievable views on life, the game, where they want to go, and you know, coaches, we're fairly clear on where we'd like to go and where we'd like the team to go, and I think we've been, you know, very good in agreeing how we'd like to work with the players, and that has definitely been around. They're the guys that are going to drive this, and everything that I'm reading on culture and everything that I'm listening to, and I look back on my own experiences, you know, I'm seeing that the players have got to drive this. Once they drive it, they own it. It becomes reality. And as Pete says there, this dream of what do we want it to look like in 5 years' time, you know, and how good will that be? That's their vision. They begin with the end in mind, you know, and give them or enough autonomy to be able to drive that through. And that's one of the most exciting things I've been involved with for a very long time.
Is it possible to always bring a whole group with you over time?
Good question. I mean, you'd like to think everybody just comes along at the same time. I think you have to be prepared to pick people off as they're not going and wonder why, often where they're at. I mean, as a version of a team is going for a common goal. So the common goal needs to be there. And I think you'll hear people talk about higher purpose things. What other things are there that are a bit bigger than you? Because when something's bigger than you, it's much more fun to do. If it was just about winning, then actually the moment of winning is great, but it's not as great as having something else to go for again and again and again. So you start to, I think, try and evolve those into it. And will everybody go straight away? No, I think in some ways you get people, call them what you like, people call them cultural architects, disciples of a certain way, you know, coalition, whichever one you want to call it. But change is tough and it's difficult, and you need support. And you'll find there will be hopefully a group of players who get onto it quick and they can see where it's going, and they start to change people. And the big players obviously have a bigger influence on the group. And that to me is, it's trying to help. I said before, seeing it from people's other point of view. I look back on my career, and when I've got it wrong, it's because I've not spent enough time trying to see where other people are coming from. Especially when you get high profile players, experienced players, and you've got to see what situation they're in at that given time that might be stopping them buying into whatever it is you want to do. Because all sportsmen want to play in a successful team. All sportsmen and women want to enjoy themselves and they want to get better. And so often, you know, if I see something that isn't right now, you know, I used to wait for the opportunity. Now I don't wait normally. I'll say, listen, let's go for a coffee.
Yeah.
And then why coffee? Because they know something's coming. I know something's coming, and it's got a bit of time to settle. And I can ask the question, you know, do you realise what you're doing is actually slowing us down? It's not helping, in my opinion. Where are you coming from? Are you meaning to do it? Have I got it right? And then sometimes they say something to you, you go, oh, right, I can see where you're coming from now. And it hasn't blown up, and you can start to deal with it. Sometimes they just were not aware that that's their habit and what they've been doing. So, yeah, if it's not going well, I'm shaking at the end of the day from the amount of coffee I've drunk.
Excellent. Right, sorry, there's these questions coming through. I want to pursue this, but I should give these people who are good enough to ask the questions. Here's a nice simple one. Thank you, Richard. What's the biggest thing you've learned as a coach compared to 10 plus years ago? Shiny, I'll ask that for you. Give Peter a breather for a second.
10 plus years ago. So I've been lucky enough to, have a gentleman that we know very well, Gordon Lord, who was elite coach education manager at the ECB, and he put us through our level 4. I think Pete and I were on the pilot in year 2000. That was a long time ago. And I was an incredibly process-driven technical coach, splurging. Everything that I'd learned, that was on the player. It was on everyone. And I absolutely would encourage young coaches to go and learn learn their game, be that the science side of it, but the part that I have absolutely come back to in the biggest way is the art of coaching. And Lordy always encouraged me to put the person first. And I would say that I have hopefully gone much more towards the person now than the technical skill. That'll happen. We've got ways of hopefully helping players to enjoy that and to see that they're getting better. But if they trust you, and they think that you can help them improve, then that's got to be the way. We're all in there to improve, and I would say since I've really concentrated on listening to the person and getting to know the person, the coaching has become more enjoyable, but I do feel more effective. So I would say from 10 years ago, you might have seen a bit of a technical driven animal. Hopefully now I'm someone who'll just really enjoy the relationship and still have something to offer, but that's the most important starting point for me.
Thank you. So, Pete, art or science of coaching, or both, I guess?
Oh, it's an art. There's no doubt about that. It doesn't mean there's not science in it. Science, statistics, and all that sort of stuff, they accelerate stuff. But anything that involves timing is normally an art form of some timing and rhythms. And rhythm is often the forgotten word in sport. A player can only play well if they have rhythm. Rhythm means you're relaxed and means you're in touch with yourself. And I said about changing lenses. Coaches can put that lens on where who's in rhythm or not. If you want to know if they're in rhythm, they will look fluid. If they're out of rhythm, they'll look wooden. Normally, people in rhythm will have a smile or an intensity that is born from enjoyment rather than from worry. So you can see those things, but you've got to look. And I suppose, that's what I've learned over time. I've learned lots of different things. One of them would be to look differently at different situations through a different lens. I think I probably started as a young coach wanting to prove my point, and I've learned over time that it's now about trying to help other people prove theirs, which has been, it's much more attractive to other people, but it's their vehicle, their chance, their opportunity to go with. Their moment in time, which isn't that long for a sportsman or any athlete, really, when you take it in the big scheme of things. And I think the more you coach, you have to, I'll say to people, in general, you'll watch a lot to say a little. Whereas maybe you start with you say a lot and don't watch enough. If you know what I mean, it nearly flips its head. So I think you watch, doesn't mean you don't speak, but timing is everything. Windows of opportunity to coach, they're not all the time. I say people, put water on a stone, it just falls off it. At some time, your athlete turns into a sponge and you drop it in there and it'll go in. And that's your window, but you've got to wait. And sometimes you might have to wait a long time. Because if you don't wait, then you become running the risk of becoming a nag, if I'm honest, where you're forever going and your voice is now diluted, and whatever you say, even if it's an absolute gem, isn't really landed anymore because you've lost that sort of impact that you need as a coach.
Well, Nat actually asked the question in advance, and I think you've sort of answered it, but thank you for the question, Nat. Can you overcoach someone?
I think many people have different opinions of coaching. And yeah,
when you say that, you mean what coaching actually is?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And some people some people really love to be coached technically, and they will improve very, very quickly. And I think the skill is to work out. Well, it's not the one size fits all, is it? You've got to be able to work out who you're with, what they want, where they want to go, where are the improvements going to be made. And that's, you know, coach, you just get given loads of generally nice technical information. You know, you might get some nice methods in there, but actually that one that you've got to really work with is how are you going to help that individual improve. And even if you've had a great bit of success with one person one way, you know, to think that'll work with everyone would probably be unwise. And it's, you know, coaching for me is, some people will love to be coached day and night. Others would send them an article, have a little read of that, see if that resonates with you. Anything we can work on? You know, there are so many different ways to get to performance, and that's possibly one of my biggest learnings going back to the last 10 years, which is, you know, it's not my way that will get them there. Yeah, it's their way, our way, but making sure that we, you know, we find the right balance. So some people might love being overcoached. Others might like to do it differently.
Pete, rather than ask you to answer that, because we've got more and more flooding in now, this is an interesting one, which Tony Minicello, who we interviewed a couple of weeks ago, I know it's a pet thing of his, a pet subject, which is around, it's a science and art question, really. Mim's asking, bear with me, basically, is there a risk in cricket and sport that science is overtaking coaching?
Yes, definitely. As we know more, yeah, I mean, but basically, I first started coaching, and the challenge was to find out information for people. I think now the challenge is to protect them from it, because there's so much, and people learn in such different ways now. You know, for me, I mean, you know, I watched my son go through it. You know, he learned cricket as much through watching YouTube of Virat Kohli or Josh Butler or a slow motion or a masterclass. Lots of different ways people learn, and there's so much info. Now the coach's job then becomes much more to help them clarify what's important and not for them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So definitely the science side of it, a lot of strength and conditioning coaches in there, which I think there's nothing wrong with strength and conditioning or the science end of it. The key is that is still coach-led, i.e. head coach-led, or in Chinese specialist bowling coaches, because that's because the specialist at the end point is, where does this player need to get to perform better? Two things in sport: cost and benefit. Same as in business. Cost in sport is time. Benefit is how much you get better. And I think head coaches or any coach should never forget that balance. You want to do things that have got the minimum cost, i.e. the shortest time, for the maximum benefit, and you do those first. Because, you know, I can watch maybe a lad do sprint training, and I'm thinking, well, you can't turn yet in our sport. Well, I could change your turn speed, I reckon, in 3 or 4 sessions, and probably take 2 seconds off a run 3, which is probably 2 or 3 yards. Yet your sprint, to get better at sprinting, is really important, maybe, but it's still going to take 6 months. So once we've got the big things done first, you know, basics of stuff, then we look at the lesser things. I think that decision making is really important, and that's partly art form, and it's partly with the player. So setting the goal of what the player needs to get to become absolutely the best they can do is normally a shared thing between coach and player. How the player gets there is all the players for me. That's where overcoaching can come in sometimes, when the coach wants both the goal, you need to get better playing through the leg side, you need to get a better spin pass, you need to get better at kicking the ball 30 yards, but the coach also wants to tell the player how to do it before they've even had a go. And, you know, so you've got to get better at this, and you will do it by doing this, this, and this. I think that's where the coach steps back, watches, observes, and then the player, often when he can't do something, he'll come to you and say, you know, I can't do it, what's going on? And, you know, you'll then, your technical knowledge is really now absolutely crucial. Can you then give some insight? Look at this, look at that, get your weight more in, get your core going through the ball, try this, whatever. That is where your expertise, I think, now has a real influence. So it's the same process, but the timing and the art of it is slightly different than just front-ending it all. That's what I'd say I find over time.
Shani, as a specialist coach, but someone who's obviously immersed himself in the science and then navigated more towards the art side, what's your view on the role of science in sport, and is it or is it not perhaps being given too much notice at the moment?
So I think the discipline that I've leaned towards. I'm a general coach, Giles. I've always been just a coach, but lean towards looking at fast bowling as a specialism. I think it's had to listen to the science, but what I've tried to do is immerse myself in it, see it from their point of view, but then also challenge them with, okay, so how can you explain this? The fact that I'll give you an example, and it's a huge example I've given to every strength and conditioning coach I've worked with. Why don't we do enough long running when actually that's what you do? They'll say, look, GPS says speeds up and down, understand that, but it doesn't feel the same. And Pete mentioned there about feel. Feel is so important. When you get to the end of a day and you've bowled 15, 20 overs, it feels horrible. You go and do a 5-mile run, it feels horrible. You go and do 10 sprints, it doesn't feel horrible just for that moment. So there's something in the science and the art and the experience that's got to come together. And they're the challenges that I really do try and set the scientists. I'm massively respectful. I think they have helped us progress as a game. But as Pete said, at times we need protection, or players need protection so they can do what they want to do best, which is get out there and go and perform. And it's tough. When you cross the white line, you just want to go out with your head clear to do your stuff, not be thinking about, for example, a workload, not to be thinking about a technical position. Get out there and go and love the game. So I think as coaches, our job is to really challenge, but listen to these brilliant people who have got great knowledge, but then make it into the game form for the players.
Lee's just fired in a question. Thank you, Lee, which it relates to both of your answers. Thank you for that. It's saying, what specific advice can you give a coach to improve their synthesis of the information they want to use to help the player?
Oh, big word, synthesis. I'm not sure I've got that one in there.
I was hoping you knew what it meant.
Yeah, listen, well, thanks, Lee. Listen, mate, I mean, it's because you know it, I would say, doesn't mean you have to tell it the player at that given time. It might mold how you deal with a player to create situations that they will learn it or whatever. Often I say to anybody, when you've got new information or you've got some information, I think if you live with it for a little bit yourself, often you get it clear in your own mind, because top flight anything has clarity and simplicity to it. Because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy to do, and doesn't mean it's simple for somebody else. You're basically trying to add clarity and simplicity to something. The biggest danger you have, I think, one of the danger you have as coaches, is you give them another system, if that makes sense. So I've got the way I do it at the moment. I now see some information in my head that I think you could do this to make you better. Now, patience tells me that if we challenge them to do something and they can't do it, then the questions start asking, and then we start saying, well, you could look at this. And then the system that emerges is their growth into that system where you've inputted some information. If you come in and say, you'd be a better player if you did this, this, and this, well, then that's now your system that's in their head. So they now have two systems, the old system and the new system that you've given them. Now, if it doesn't work straight away, which no system really does, you've got to fail, who will the athlete blame? He's going to blame you as a coach, because you gave him this system that's crap and it's not working under pressure. So he'll go back to his old system, but he can't quite get to that because he's got a bit of this. So now he's in the middle, and whose system am I going to it? Mine or yours? And he ends up with somewhere in the middle, till eventually, often he goes, F it, I'm just going to go play. And he starts playing well again. Mm. So skill progression with information you have, I think you are careful with, because you allow that to evolve. And now that evolves into your performer, it doesn't have to be the day you get to know the information. That's what I'd say. You build it in, you create more and more evidence for it to be essential. And one of the big dangers we have, I think, in sport now is that technique nearly becomes a dirty word. It's not. You need to be technically good. Technique means efficiency of movement, really, for me, with the sport you do. And of course, that's going to have to be enhanced, because all the best players in all sports, they get better in their own style of doing it. And that's going to need help at times, because they feel it through their internal system. We can see it through the external system. There's video and other things to help them with. But if anyone gets overly reliant on one or the other, or they don't take other things in, so it just feels great, that's not enough normally. I watch my golf swing, it feels great, it looks crap on video, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And that's the reality. Then I see the video and I see how fast and crap it looks, and I start to change my feel system. If that makes any sense to you, Lee, hopefully.
I'm sure it does. Shine, have you got anything to add to that?
I've coaching wise, and I try to have a picture in my mind of where I possibly think that player could go. You're obviously finding out from them where they want to go, but we've got that lovely experience of having worked with hundreds, thousands of players, seen guys develop, seen guys crash and burn. I watch cricketers all over the world on TV or whatever, and you actually try to work out, with your mind's eye, could they get to a certain type of level? And then I think the art is, without saying you can get to there, can you help them improve, their game so that they can realize their dreams? And with, as I said, some players you can be very, 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 very explicit about where you think they can go. Others can't take that, and some will just absolutely fly with it. So, with regards to the information, I think synthesizing the information, I found it very useful to try and have a picture in my mind. So that begin with the end in mind. I like that. So where could we possibly get this person to? Can you then go with them with their dream, and become that person who tries to find some solutions to maybe a couple of little sticking points, but also accept that it's not going to be plain sailing. And I was just going back to that 10-year thing as well. Patience and calmness have come into my form of coaching, rather than impatience and being anxious through every stage of a player's development. It's not going to happen to them overnight. Sometimes it doesn't happen to any of them. But if they sense calmness, if they sense that you're there to encourage and work with them, I think that information that everyone's looking to sink in will get in over time.
Just one thing, Giles, thing to add to that, to back up what Shani said there as well, is that a lot of, to get information in, I go back to the safety challenge. You've got the environment right, so you've challenged them with some form of practice that allows them to see what's happening. So if there's an intervention, it's not because you're improved performance. So if I want to bowl the ball on top of some, if I measure how many you get in 24, and I know roughly what a top flight bowler get, if there's a gap between the two, then the player's going to be coming to me and saying, well, what's going on?
Yeah.
And then that allows that information to go in with a real purpose. It's context-based to get better as a performer. And as I said before, the danger sometimes is in the enthusiasm to want to get the information in. It's not context-based, it's just said. And the player doesn't quite get, this is about becoming better to deliver, because one of the fundamentals I would say for a coach is to try and build belief in their athlete. And belief is, ask the academics, the only way to do it is performance accomplishment. They've got to do something. You can tell them they're good, but they have to prove to themselves on the training ground normally that they're good. And then they can go and confirm the probability. I get 23 out of 24 on the top of off stump in practice. Well, I've got great belief that in the game, I can go and do that. And that, then the technique that goes with to be able to do that for that individual starts to evolve, because he might just shock you and naturally change and suddenly start getting better. And he actually does what you want him to do without even saying it, by the nature that the challenge is in front of him. And you've given him that opportunity to self-write himself without your input. And then, great. Then you emphasize the fact that he's adjusted this and this, and that might become one of his basics he's got to keep in place to keep doing at that level.
I'm really glad you mentioned context, actually. We've had a few questions coming through prior and during around preparing coaching sessions. And I know we've mentioned Mr. Allred already around creativity and, the way that he always is able to introduce pressure is, the interview I had with him the other week, because he gets people believing in the context, he creates something around it. How important is that for you when you're setting sessions, is to give people a broader context and to inject creativity in what you're doing, so the guys buy in to something bigger than necessarily something that's very specific?
Yeah, I actually follow Dave's repair training match sequence, which, you know, whether it's we're in, I'm a big believer that you can keep improving your game when you're in the white heat of battle. You know, whether that's you come off and you've got a small break and you talk about, you know, something that allows you to make an improvement in your game. I'm not a subscriber to you've got to leave it until you've got a lot of time. That for me wastes opportunities. But I think to do that, you've got to have created that mindset with the player during your repair sessions, your training sessions. And that then gives them the ability to be able to move quickly in a game. You know, T20 is an incredibly quick game. Even 4-day cricket, you know, you go out and you play for 2 hours, you come in, something might not be clicking. But if there's a mindset that one little intervention that you've worked on in practice can get you going again, you know, that for me is your gold stuff. And that's when your top performers become absolute match winners when you need it. So sorry, I've just gone off on one there. What was the original question?
It was, oh no, we were just relishing your flight of fancy. No, it was about the importance of context and
Yes.
how you keep being creative to keep it real and relevant to the players.
Yeah, and I've been lucky enough to spend lots of time with Dave and his sort of creative juices. We used to meet up on the motorway, and I'd say, Dave, I've got a problem. I can't work out how to get this Yorker skill working, and you know, we'd smash a few things around, and then he'd come up with some really creative ideas, and it was incredible how through, you know, really implicit training brought about a massive performance change. And you know, putting that into context for a player, if you going back to Morsey's 23 out of 24, that's actually what they want to know, and that goes back to the creator fact that proves you're getting better. Yeah. That then leads to that mindset of I can continually improve, even if it's in a break time where I've got 30 minutes to get some food down me and then get out there and perform for my team.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. I'm very conscious, guys, we're starting to run out of time. The time has flown, so thank you both. There's way too many questions coming in from people, so thank you for everybody that sent them in. If I may, I'll ask you afterwards. I might fire a few to you and see if you can just give me some short answers that we can post later. But just before we conclude, are you all right both for another 5 minutes or so?
Yeah, absolutely fine.
The dog might need walking. I don't know. I don't want to disrespect the pooch. Okay, I'll just pick this one randomly rather than trying to link it. So Sarah, thank you, Sarah. You've both spoken a lot about being led by the needs and wants of the players. Are the current systems in most sports so top-down? Oh, I might regret asking you this one. It sounds like it might get political. Are they so top-down, centralized, sanitized that boxes people in too soon, rather than supporting a more organic growth at all levels of the game? Or do you think it's working well?
Well, personally for me, I think Sarah's got a point if she thinks that it is a little bit either top-down or structured. I think academies have been a really interesting development in all sports because they create an unbelievable opportunity of contact time, an unbelievable opportunity of a chance to develop people quickly, but they also run the huge risk of taking away natural development and specialising maybe too early, and a safety first model starting to develop. And that, I think, is what's so important. If those academies are right, I have to say to people, sport, top flight, anything is normally it's played by two things. One, how good you are, and the second is what your presence as a sportsman or woman is confidence in action, how badly you make other people perform. And that is how you go about it. Now, you develop that by a much more natural process than going through an academy curriculum. If it's set like that, you learn to do this, and this, because then you're the same as everybody else who's been through that system. Your whole goal as a sportsman or woman is to have a point of difference, which will be something different to your peers. Now, the danger with going this way down is some of the things we expect at top. So if I'm a top flight cricketer, I expect people to be able to repeat, simplify certain things, be able to deliver under pressure. Now, if I'm trying to get that, I'm now saying that in the academy, I want you to be able to repeat all the time. If you want to be a pro, how else do you think you'll get there if you can't keep delivering exactly the same? Well, at that point, I'd like it, but not if it compromises their point of difference. So I'm a quick bowler who bowls fast. But now, to get repeatability in 23 out of 24, I start to bowl 3/4 pace. Now, that might be the right answer, but the only person that makes that decision on compromise is the player. I'm a golfer who can hit it 300 yards, but 4 out of every 5 goes in the bush. The coach might say, come back to 250 and you'll be more consistent. And he does much better. But actually, he then goes to the pro game and he needs 300, but he now tries to ramp it up. He keeps going in that bush and he can't do it. If the player did it, he might take himself to 280, not 250. He might do it sometimes and not other when he felt great, he'll stay at 300. So I think that education of sportsmen, it's there through academies, but it's dangerous. It's a really dangerous balance because it has the top end down has a danger of front ending everything rather than organic learning. So I go to the playground with my mate, I hit balls in the garden, I do things slightly quirky. And a lot of the very top flight performers, we find things that they did was different to everybody else. Oh, well, I started doing this. It can be hitting a golf ball with a cricket stump, going back to a great cricketer, Don Bradman, to, well, actually, I used to go on runs like this and I used to hill train. They find different ways of doing stuff. So I'm with you. It's a fine balance. I think the key is, I would say to any coach, your responsibility is for the environment you're in. So I think if you make whatever, it's wrong to blame central bodies, I think, because it's too easy.
Mm-hmm.
So if the ECB for us, the English Cricket Board, say to us, we can't do this, this and this, because they say it doesn't mean in the setup we run we have to do certain things, but it's not going to restrict us doing the things we think are going to be the most important, which might be creativity and flair and fun within our academy, even though we have to do certain things that obey an audit, etc., for the ECB. You can work around both. But the danger is, I would say to anybody, if anybody plays a blame game, either with their players, the players with their coaches, remember the chain of blame normally goes up. So club grounds for us blame the county blames the ECB will blame for us the ICC, the International Cricket Board. That's the way it goes. I would say to any coach, don't influence what you can around you, because it will make a massive difference to those athletes. And they only have, it's their time. You're only 15 to 18 months. And that, or you tend to, if your enthusiasm goes because the coach hasn't created an environment like that, then I think the coach takes some responsibility for that, because the next crew come along. So I always feel very responsible with the people you coach, that you create the opportunity for them at their time, because those times only come along once. You're 21 once, you're 22 once, and that means it's a real privilege if you are the coach to try and create an opportunity for them.
Brilliant, thank you. Shiny, got anything else to add on?
Yeah, that's a great question from Sarah. I think there's some balance in there, with that, that top down, that organizational, structure-y type thing. But that organic side of it is very, very important. And we come back to creativity. We come back to, once again, that environment. And I think it's very, very important for any coach, no matter what you're doing, to make sure that fun and that organic nature does stay in the game. So, we're there to help players realise their dreams, aren't we? And we mustn't kick that dream out of them. As Pete says there, 250 as opposed to 300. I know the one that I'd probably be thinking of all the time, but can you find a way to control that 300 rather than think about 250? I think that's a great question that we all need to think about whenever we coach and whenever we're involved in anything that is to do with personal development of players.
Brilliant. Last couple of questions. There's one that came in here before from Simon, which I thought was a nice way to move us back to while we're all sitting talking on Zoom, really. Getting back into the team after injury is always a challenge. I guess you've always got that thing, you've been away on the sidelines and everything. Currently, loads of people are in a similar situation. I'm assuming he means with regards to they've been away from work and everything else. How do you handle it with players, and what's your advice for anyone watching about getting back into your game?
I've probably been in this situation quite a bit through my career. Injuries are a really interesting one. and people deal with them differently, and they deal with the whole situation. My advice is, in a strange way, it's a time to actually bring your game back online. So regardless of what injury you've got, injury normally comes after a long period, hopefully, of successful play, or maybe just a long season. You get an injury, doesn't matter what sport you're playing, and you've got an enforced layoff. Within there, it's right, okay, work out the time frame of wherever you are, but then go back into your sort of Dave Allred snapshotty type thing, which is, let's look at my game and use this as an incredibly positive time to get better, not just sort my injury out, but actually come back a better, more complete player and person. And that's what I would definitely encourage. And I suppose, in a way, I've tried to go into this lockdown with a mindset of, how can I come back better so that I can be better for the players, better for Notts County Cricket Club, and and enjoy everything that we do even more. Going towards this, what are we going to look like in 5 years' time? It's going to be great fun. And I would say that injuries are a really tough time, and the first thing you do is you think, oh no, here we go again. But there can be positives that come out of it.
And Pete, sort of, I guess the second part of that, which is when you're actually, say, coming through the injury, you've done what you've done, and in the sense of people around the world, they're literally going back to workplaces that they haven't been to for a very long time. There's a lot of similarities coming back to injuries from just getting back into what you were doing, albeit we're going to be social distancing, etc. What advice would you give to people effectively to sort of steel themselves and get themselves ready to go back into something that was once so familiar and is now quite distant?
I think you hopefully, well, first thing is, perspective is important of looking at it. So, I mean, normally the beauty of a gap, the injury or what we're going through at the moment, it makes you realize how much you miss something and how much you enjoy it, and the perspective changes. So all sportsmen and women start by loving the game that I know have gone on. So my first thing I would say to anybody coming back, make a promise to yourself that you're going to love it and you appreciate it for what it is, because you're doing it. And with that, take a bit of heat off yourself when you first go in, because the problem you've got, it's a bit like the first day of term when you go back. There's an excitement about it, and you can't blow it all out. You can't take the, if you've shaken up a bottle of champagne and popped the cork and all your fizz goes on the first day, then you've lost it. Be aware that you want to keep this feeling of excitement like the first day. You want to keep it forever if you can. Because anybody who can recreate their first day of anything again and again and again is exceptional. They're elite. They're going to be exceptional, whatever walk of life they choose. So that, to me, is how I'd look at it. Also, you will make mistakes up front. You will be slightly off the pace up front, and you will take time to build into it. But the only way you'll build up fast is to accept making mistakes and not be where you want to be. If you expect to be perfect when you first go in because you really want to, it's not how sport works, unfortunately. I really want to hit a straight drive here, or I really want to hit it down the middle of the fairway. Invariably doesn't give us what we want. We know sport is expression. So expressing yourself when you first come in the way you want to be, even though it doesn't work, but still having a smile on your face, I think will make the biggest impact.
Brilliant, thank you. And just to close, a couple of very, very important questions. Alison's asking each of you, what's your lockdown song?
Good question. Well, I'm a bit of a Van Morrison junkie at times, me. So I like all sorts. I get lots of different music, actually, because my son Tom, he likes stuff, but be it from, I can take his Khalid and stuff like that. I like that sort of stuff. So I like, also, I've got a daughter also who's 26, and she's a Jessie Ware and all this sort of stuff. So I get loads of different music. So I like diversity. I don't get stuck on one song normally.
But if you had to choose,
if I had to choose one, it would probably. Oh God, good question. At the moment, well, I'm a bit Van at the moment, Van Morrison. So. I'm listening to the album Poetic Champions Composed. So really, not so much Queen of the Slipstream would probably be my number one tune, I think.
Great track. I know it. Yeah. Shani's been writing notes while you've been talking, so I can't wait to see what he's going to say. What about you, Shani?
I've been getting my playlists out. So I'm similar to Pete, two lads. We fire songs around. So I get some horrific stuff that comes in from rugby playlists and stuff like that. But I have a listen and so I can comment on them. But I would say I'm sort of a bit Dire Straits, Brothers in Arms, live versions where you can actually hear the instruments and what's going on. I love that. And I get into my own world when I go training. That sort of music is fantastic for me.
Excellent. See, what better way to conclude? You can go away and listen to your playlist now. Listen, both, thank you ever so much. Really, really appreciate that. And everyone that's watched or you're going to be watching later on, I hope you've enjoyed it. There's been fantastic answers. What we will attempt to do is, we won't be able to answer all the questions because there's too many, but where we can, I'll try and persuade these guys to spend a bit more time, give me some responses, and then we'll write them together and we'll post them up at some point in the next couple of weeks. So without further ado, thank you again, both. I hope that you get back to the game you both love very, very soon. But in the meantime, go well, stay safe, stay healthy.
Thanks, Giles. Great fun. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Take care.